The first order of business is on that support level extension. Since it's two half-inch sheets glued together, we're doing the same thing here, then we'll cut up the segments and attach them. While that's drying, we're going to get started on the actual ring itself, which is a bit thinner, but we did allow some extra room, and we're doing it in 6 pieces to try and minimize the waste. The ring is 5.5 inches deep, with each layer being only half an inch thick. That's 11 layers, with 6 pieces on each layer, so we've got quite a few pieces to cut out. We did a quick rough layout here just to make sure everything looked good. The final ring is going to be 3/4 of an inch thick, so these pieces are about an inch heavy, and we tried to cut these angles between them with the oscillating trimmer tool, but it turned out that the chop saw was really just as good as anything. The angles don't have to be perfect anyway, since we lap and stagger the joints. We didn't get the gluing process for this first ring on video, but you'll note that it's only 4 layers out of the 11 total that we're going to have at the end, and that's because my router bit's only 2 inches deep, so this is about 2 inches high. We'll trim this one up, do another of 4 layers, and then a third of 3 layers. Trim each of those and then glue them together at the end. I always find some of the first few cleanup cuts to be the most satisfying because you get to go out and bring order to chaos. All this cutting got me thinking about the waste factor also. I figured there'd be a decent amount in this because it's a curved project, which is why we went for the segmented strategy, but it would be interesting to put a figure on it, so more on that later. The gloves that I'm wearing are not for abrasion protection either. The first day I did it barehanded, and my hands were still tingling 24 hours later from the vibration, because it takes quite a bit of time to make all those different passes, and if that thing's running at 10,000 RPMs and there's two cutters on that, that's 20,000 shakes a minute, which is pretty good, so there's a lot of vibration going into my hands. And I tried these knit jersey gloves first and eventually went to full leather ones just to cut that vibration down. Vibrations are hard on the equipment too. I was having some issues with jitter, and I realized that one screw fell out and the other ones were coming loose. So it's time to get some Loctite and maybe put a couple nuts on top of those screws. We knew the ring was round from the way that we'd made it, but we took it outside to give it an informal test of strength and rigidity, which it passed with flying colors. It got down very close before it finally dropped that last bit. The support level extensions were rough cut with the jigsaw. Now, to get a good glue line, we need their inside curve to match the outside curve of the support level. So we put them on the jig here, adjust the tramelin just a little bit, and run it around. We did a quick fit test just to confirm, and it looks like the effort that we put in paid off because it's right on. Now it's time to glue on those extension pieces. We have some temporary blocks clamped onto the support level just for alignment, and then we're going to run temporary screws in from the outside to clamp that glue line. With some careful marks, we're able to get just about every joint very tight on this project, which is good because it looks nice and it's strong. Even though the outside of those extensions has not been trimmed yet, I couldn't resist getting the first section of the ring and doing a quick fit test. There's about an 1/8 inch gap everywhere. We're aiming for a 1/4 at the end, so after we trim it up, everything should be in order. A few quick passes clean up that edge, and we're ready to work on the next section of the outer ring. I should clarify that when I say outer ring, this is the same thing as the skirt piece. So we trace off some of the segments here on this one, and while I was doing this, I got to thinking about how efficient it was with all of that waste that comes off in the form of chips. So what we decided to do was measure the weight of this piece, which has 24 segments, 6 for the 4 layers each. This is essentially the next section of the ring, and then we're going to compare that weight at the end. I also compared the density of a single half-inch sheet of plywood to 2 half-inches glued together to get an idea if the glue had any effect on it, since we are going to have a bit of glue in that ring, but it was pretty negligible and probably within the margin of error for the scale. After that, we just cut them out, knocked the rough edges off, and got down to gluing them together again. I switched to using 18 gauges in the center here, just to tack it together. It's quick, and if you put them in the center, you'll never see them, and they won't be hit by the router bit either. A good clamp shot never goes awry in the woodworking crowd. This isn't all my clamps, but it is all of my C-clamps and 1 or 2 of my bar clamps, so we made a pretty good effort. The trimming process is repeated just like before, but we do bring in that previous ring a couple times just to make sure that the dimensions are matching up. One tricky thing about routing on this project was that when you change from the inside to the outside of the ring, you have to go in an opposite direction to avoid climb cutting. It didn't burn me on this project, but it has in the past, so I maintain my vigilance. With that second ring at its final dimensions, I decided to weigh it again and get that waste factor. So in deference to our metric viewers, it started out at 4.2 kilos and ended at about 2.5 kilos, which gives us a 40% waste factor. And I feel pretty good about that for this project, considering that it's round and considering how thin it is, which means that it's, something that's 3/4 of an inch thick, 1/8 of an inch on each side adds a third, 30% right there, potential waste factor. Whereas something larger, your margin of error is going to be smaller as a percentage of how big the project is. I spent a fair bit of time watching these brush sparks while I was routing, so I thought it was only fair to get it on video and share. All 3 rings are done. Time to glue them up. Gluing went pretty smoothly. In this case, we did push the limits of my clamp collection, but it worked out. We had just enough, and we went around at the end and scraped off the extra glue. The ring layers fit together very well, but it wasn't perfect. It never is. If I had to do over again, what I would do is to route the inside of the ring the same way in 3 pieces, and then join those together and route the outside all in one pass. The reason I didn't do it here is because that would require me to change the jig for that router quite a bit to make it so that the router is parallel to the floor and then can vary its position vertically. That would give you a great finish on the outside, but it would be a bit more work, and I just want to get on with the project in this case. And those clamps are just there to hold it up. They're only temporary. Now it's time to begin modifying the existing table to accommodate this ring design. Clearly the sliders are much too long, so we need to trim them up. And we did a few calculations. You can see our mark here for the distance, but that also needs to have a radius on the outside. And I thought about trying to find the center and do this and do that, and then I realized that I can just drop the ring on the outside and make a perfect mark that way, in addition to confirming all my other measurements. A little jigsaw and sandpaper action gets everything trimmed up and smoothed out nicely. Then we can drop the ring back over top and operate the lowest level of the mechanism inside that ring. There are a few issues with shortening up the slides to the degree that we have, but they're manageable and we have a plan. The main ring construction is done. We made a terrible mess, but that's okay because we're pleased with the result. It's very accurate, it seems quite strong, and it fits too, so all the math worked out. We did our initial modifications on the sliders here so that they clear, or so that they have some space left, and we did a little test drive. Everything looks good. The ring has been stationary thus far, but obviously that's not going to be the case. If it was the case, then I would have just attached it to the support level and everything would have been a lot easier. What it's going to do though is rotate and drop down to allow the table to expand, and then once it's expanded, that ring is going to rotate and come back up underneath. And what we get for that is the trade with shortening these sliders. We lose some support here, but instead of having individual sliders and then ones in here for the rising sections, we have one big ring that's strong all the way around. So I think it's a good trade, and we've got some rollers and some ramps to install, all that to figure out for next week. So I hope you come back and see how it operates. Thanks.